Welcome, everybody. My name is Anna Ka'ahanui. I am co-founder of Capital Nature in the DC area. And just a little tech, I'm sure many of you have been on Zoom calls or calls like Zoom. We are recording this, so please note that. Please mute yourselves during the presentation. And you can turn your video off. After the slide presentation, we'll be having a conversation and questions and answers, which you can do in the chat, and I can facilitate that after when we do the Q&A. And if you have any questions as we're going through, just go ahead and put them in the chat, and I'll be monitoring those as we go. All right, take it away, Stella. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Anna. Welcome, everyone. I know we have some old friends and some new friends on this Zoom, and we're looking forward to a really great presentation by Melanie and also a good conversation, hopefully between all of us. And we're so pleased to host Melanie Choukas-Bradley. As many of you know, she's a renowned naturalist in the Washington area and also author of many books. I'm sure one of them sits on your bookshelf, including City of Trees, A Year in Rock Creek Park, Resilience Through Nature, and now most recently, Finding Solace on Theodore Roosevelt Island. So we're very pleased to have Melanie come join us for a presentation on her year on Theodore Roosevelt Island. And it really brings home both the beauty of the nature around us that we're discovering now, especially during this time of COVID, and also just the healing and resilience that's possible when we spend time with the natural world. Melanie?
Oh, Stella, thank you so much. Your words lulled me into a very calm and meditative state. Thank you so much. I just couldn't agree with you more that during this year that we've all been through, turning to nature and the beautiful parkland that we're so blessed with here in the Washington area has just been such a healing thing. So thank you both. I have to say that I am a huge fan of Anna and Stella and Capital Nature and all they are doing to bring our community, our really growing community of nature lovers together in Washington. Washington isn't known for its nature lovers, but we are a huge, vital community, and Anna and Stella are right at the center of it. Bringing people together, bringing events to people, and I am just very grateful to both of you. And thank you all for taking your lunch hour. I hope you do get to eat during this presentation if it is lunchtime for you, and thank you for taking time to spend with us. So I'm going to take you on a little journey to Theodore Roosevelt Island, and the photographs that I'll be presenting here are by Gary W. House, who is an amazing photographer who spent a lot of time photographing the birds and trees and the scenes at Theodore Roosevelt Island. My dear friend Anna Ka'ahanui, who always has her camera with her capturing nature's beauty. Susan Austin Roth, if you're familiar with my book, A Year in Rock Creek Park, Susan did the photographs for that. And then if you don't see a name next to a photo, that means that I took it probably on my iPhone. So this is my new book, Finding Solace at Theodore Roosevelt Island. And very much like my Rock Creek Park book, I spent a year going to the island as often as I could, walking the trails, sitting on the rocks by the water, kayaking around the island, and just really getting to know it in an intimate way. And the book records a year of seasonal change and nature's beauty at the island. My year of record was the summer of 2016 to the summer of 2017, which was a very traumatic year politically on the national front for many of us. And that's a backdrop to the book. So there is a history kind of underlying the events that take place on the island. And I go to the island for healing. The foreword is by Thomas Lovejoy. I know many of you know who he is. He's a world-renowned conservation biologist. He's a professor of environmental science and policy at George Mason, and he's also a senior fellow at the UN United Nations Foundation. He is the scientist who coined the phrase biological diversity, which we're also focused on now. The artwork for the book is by my dear friend, Tina Theme Brown. She lives out by Sugarloaf Mountain, and she and I did 2 books about Sugarloaf together. So it was really fun to reunite with her for this book. And you see the kingfisher there on the cover, and then the pen and ink kingfisher to the left is at the head of each chapter. Each month in the book starts with the kingfisher. And I was inspired to write this book by a kingfisher. I had it really bordered on a mystical experience with a kingfisher, and I related in the book. And it was a female kingfisher. You can see her rusty belly band. She invited me to write this book. And I just wanted to give you, I know a lot of you know who I am, and we've been out in the field together many times, had many wonderful times in the field, and we will have those times again when we get through the pandemic. But for those of you who don't know me, I came to Washington many years ago when my husband started law school. I had been the news director for a radio station in New Hampshire, and I thought I would just kind of breeze into town and get a fabulous job as a journalist. I didn't find my dream job, but what happened was something much more wonderful. I fell in love with the trees of Washington. And, you know, I had grown up in Vermont, and I'd been living in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. And so I've always been a nature lover. And when I came here, I was just stunned by the beauty and diversity of the trees. And I found out that Washington had been known as the city of trees for over a century, and that many of our leaders were serious tree lovers, and that our trees here are incredibly diverse. We've got in our native flora, we're overlapping with the northern and southern trees, the Piedmont and the coastal plain trees, and then people have brought trees from all over the world. So I wrote this book, City of Trees, when I was in my 20s, and then I just never looked back. And these are the books behind me on the mantelpiece now. I've written 7 nature books. Finding Solace at Theodore Roosevelt Island is my most recent. And as much as I love writing, I think I love even more just being out in nature with other nature lovers. So I love leading field trips, and I have been doing them for very small, socially distanced groups, but most of the things I've been doing lately have been virtual. The picture down below on the right is a forest bathing walk in the garden behind the Smithsonian Castle. I'm also a forest bathing guide. I became a guide a few years ago. I went to Japan and learned about forest bathing from guides in Japan. And I love to lead forest bathing walks right in the middle of the city. Here we are in the city. These pictures were taken by Anna and Stella, and we were leading a forest bathing walk for Friends of Oxen Cove with our friend Brenda Richardson. She organized this walk, and this is an absolutely beautiful place where Oxen Run flows into the Potomac River. And you can see we found these smooth stones, and we were holding them to our hearts and to our faces on the forest bathing walk. So during this time, you know, when we first really got hit by the pandemic, and we were asked or ordered to stay home back in the spring, I think that, you know, for me, the time, and for all of us, it coincided with the coming of spring. And I've been hearing from a lot of people who really took that who took it as an opportunity to spend more time in nature, because they couldn't go to their workplaces, because they couldn't go to restaurants and movie theaters and bowling alleys. What we had was nature. And in this area, we are so blessed with both cultivated and wild beauty. And these are 2 of Anna's beautiful photographs. On the left, the cherry blossoms, they represent the cultivated beauty in our city, the magnolias, the cherries, the many beautiful gardens, the arboretum, the Capitol grounds, the Botanic Garden. And then on the right, representing wild Washington, our native Virginia bluebells blooming on Theodore Roosevelt Island. And I love both. You know, I love wild beauty and I love cultivated beauty, and I like a combination of the 2. And we're blessed with all of that here. And I think a lot of people, you know, I think probably most of you on this call are longtime nature lovers. But for those who, you know, this connection with nature was kind of a new thing, kind of by default, what people discover is that there is drama all around us. Nature is endlessly entertaining. There's always something happening. So I want to now take you to Theodore Roosevelt Island. So if you could just walk across the footbridge with me. This is the footbridge from the Virginia shore to the island. The island is administered by the National Park Service. It is a memorial to Theodore Roosevelt, and it's an 88-acre island. No cars or even bicycles are allowed on the island, so it is a real refuge. There are beautiful upland woods. There's a shoreline with all kinds of riparian trees and rocks along the shore. And the bird life is really astounding any time of year. When I walk across that bridge, I just feel my blood pressure dropping. And I wanted you to see here where it's nestled in. So this photograph was taken before the Theodore Roosevelt Bridge was built and even before the footbridge. The island is tucked in between the Georgetown shore and the Roslyn shore. And you'll see a little island off to the right. That is called Little Island. And the Potomac River, where it splits around the island, it's the Georgetown Channel to the east, which is at the top of the photo. And then it's called Little River to the west. So I love that you have Little Island and Little River. And this shows you how close the island is to everything. The White House, which is there, it's red on this map, right above the ellipse. You can see it's just due east of the island. So the island is due west of the White House, right there. And so many people have never been to the island. It's kind of hiding in plain sight. The island is the southern part of the Potomac Gorge, and the Potomac Gorge starts at Great Falls, and then there's 15 miles of river going down to Theodore Roosevelt Island. You can see on this map there's parkland on both sides of the river, all the way down the river, and there are trails, and this is just such a treasure for us here in our riverside city. We have our two beautiful rivers, the Potomac and the Anacostia, with trails along both of them. The Potomac Gorge is one of the most biodiverse places in the country. There are many rare plants there and rare plant communities, and it is just really special. So I wanted to give you a little, I'm mostly going to be focusing on nature today because we're all nature lovers, but I did want to give you a little history too. So Native Americans lived on the island. There have been a lot of artifacts found that go back over many years, you know, pottery shards and projectile points and animal bones. And the Nacotchtank tribe, members of the Nacotchtank tribe lived on the island until the early 18th century. And the earliest names for the island were Anacostan and Analostan Island, earliest known names. And then the family of George Mason owned the island for more than 100 years. George Mason's father bought it in 1717. And then George Mason's son, John, built this manor house that you see on the right. And then on the left is how it's a map of, or, you know, a graphic of how he cultivated the island end to end. It was a real horticultural showplace. There were gardens and orchards and, you know, tree-lined roadways. And it was a destination for Washington society from the, you know, the latter part of the 18th century into the early part of the 19th century. And the Masons they operated a ferry that went from Georgetown to the island. And then they built a causeway to the Virginia shore. So you could go from Georgetown to the island and then on the causeway to Virginia. And this is how, according to the White House Historical Association, this is how James Madison escaped during the War of 1812 when the British were burning the city in 1814. He took the ferry from Georgetown to here, to this ferry landing on the island, and then the causeway to Virginia. All kinds of crazy stuff has happened on the island. It changed hands many times after the Masons. You know, picnicking, swimming, you know, all the things you would expect. Gambling went on the island, and jousting. This is a drawing of jousting on the island. During the Civil War, the first U.S. colored troops trained on the island. And this is one of the new wayside signs that you'll find on the island. They were a joint effort of the National Park Service, the Theodore Roosevelt Association and Friends of Theodore Roosevelt Island, and they've created these really nice wayside signs. So in 1931, the Roosevelt Memorial Association, which is now the very active Theodore Roosevelt Association, purchased the island as a memorial to Roosevelt. It's a very appropriate memorial to our foremost conservation president. And they enlisted Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. to come up with a landscaping plan. At this point, the island was really not in good shape. It was neglected, that, you know, it was overrun, and you know, the trees had been cut down during the Mason time, and it just wasn't in great shape. So Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. came up with a landscaping plan, and, you know, to return it to a native natural forest. And the CCC planted over 20,000 trees and shrubs. And those have grown up now. When you walk on the upland trails, you're walking in the forest that they planted. And then in 1967, this plaza and statue were dedicated. And, you know, I used to not really like the statue. And, you know, I thought, well, I don't think TR would be terribly fond of this statue. I know he'd love the fact that the island is a memorial to him, but I don't know how he'd feel about the statue. But I've come to really love this plaza. It's a very calming place. They keep these fountains active during the warmer months. And then there are quotes, there are pillars behind the statue that have quotes from Roosevelt on them. So he was our foremost conservationist president. During his presidency, he preserved 230 million acres of public lands. These were national parks, national monuments, bird preserves, which became national wildlife refuges. He started the US Forest Service, and he didn't always have support for this. And he really, I mean, we really have him to thank for the fact that so much public land was preserved in our country. So a lot of people know that Roosevelt was a conservationist. I think fewer know that he was a lifelong naturalist. This is another one of these beautiful new wayside signs about him being a naturalist. You can't really see it, but there's a drawing of a shrew that he did as a little boy that is just very impressive. All his life, he loved animals, studied them. He was a taxidermist and a taxonomist. He started the Roosevelt Museum of Natural History in his bedroom when he was 8 years old. And he loved nature his whole life. And birding was his first love. And he had terrible eyesight as a child. Roosevelt, he was seriously asthmatic, you know, very sickly as a child, and very bad eyesight. So when he writes about birds, he almost always writes about the birds' songs. And this is the white-throated sparrow. And Roosevelt described the song of the white-throated sparrow as singularly sweet and plaintive. And when Anna and I were on the island on Wednesday, I led a very small, socially distanced field trip for the Audubon Naturalist Society. White-throated sparrows were singing almost everywhere we went on the island. And I kept thinking, yes, that song is singularly sweet and plaintive. Here are this is the nature pillar with his nature quotes. And, you know, there are no words that can tell the hidden spirit of the wilderness. It can reveal its mystery, its melancholy, and its charm. So, you know, even fewer people know that Roosevelt was a beautiful nature writer. He wrote over 30 books. And his first book that he wrote when he was at Harvard was a book about the birds of the Adirondack Mountains. And he wrote so beautifully of nature. I mean, I really feel like some of his nature passages are right up there with Thoreau and Emerson and John Muir. He was also just crazy. This is Roosevelt. He's right in the middle there. I can't, my pointer isn't working, but if you see the guy right in the middle of the picture climbing up the rock face, that is right next to Boulder Bridge. Can you see it, Stella? And he loved, when he was president, he loved taking his friends on these crazy expeditions in Rock Creek Park and along the Potomac River. and they couldn't keep up with him. In addition to finding solace at Theodore Roosevelt Island, I also contributed a chapter to this book that came out this year, Naturalist in the Arena. And this is the Theodore Roosevelt Trail in Rock Creek Park that goes up to Pulpit Rock, which was one of his favorite climbing spots. And because winter is coming, and I know a lot of people are thinking, well, I've gotten used to spending time outside, and I know it's better during the pandemic to spend as much time outside as possible. And people who are worried, you know, what am I going to do now that it's getting cold? I want to read this passage from this book so that you can get an idea of what Roosevelt did when it was cold. So this was a letter that he wrote to his son, Kermit, dated February 16th, 1908, when he was president. And Roosevelt wrote in the letter, yesterday afternoon, Fitz Lee and John McElhaney and I took Colonel Cecil Lyon of Texas for a walk down Rock Creek. The ice had just broken and the creek was a swollen flood running like a mill race. We did the usual climbing stunts at the various rocks and then swam the creek. And it was a good swim in our winter clothes and with hobnail boots and the icy current running really fast. Colonel Lyon balked at the swim, or rather he would have swum all right, but I was afraid to let him when I found he was doubtful as to his ability to get over, for I did not want a guest to drown on one of my walks. So, you know, a lot of people know that Roosevelt swam naked in Rock Creek and the Potomac River when he was crossing those bodies of water, but I don't think too many people know he swam in the winter in his hobnail boots. Okay, so this is a map of the island that was created by the Friends of Theodore Roosevelt Island, and you see the footbridge going over and you see the trail network. I'm going to be showing you a lot of pictures from the Swamp Trail. That's my favorite trail on the island, the one there at the top. You can see the plaza. That's Little River at the bottom and Georgetown Channel at the top. And Friends of Theodore Roosevelt Island is an all-volunteer organization that works as a partner organization with the National Park Service. And they've published these 4 bird books that you can get from them. And they also do a lot of invasives removal on the island. So they're interested in furthering education about the island and taking care of it and working hand in glove with the National Park Service. So some of the things that I think are especially cool about the island, it's right on the fall zone. So when you're on the northern end of the island, you are in the Rocky Piedmont. That's the hilly region that goes over toward the mountains. When you're on the southern end of the island, you're on the coastal plain, which is the flat, sandy area that goes over to the eastern shore. So the island is right on the fall zone. And it's a very dramatic change from the rocky northern end to the very flat southern end. The river is tidal here. It's fresh water, but it is tidal. And this shows you how dramatic the change in tides is. On the left is high tide in the tidal inlet next to the swamp boardwalk. On the right is low tide. That's the same place in high and low tide. And I love to watch the tides ebb and flow. I think, you know, for me, when the world just feels like it's going crazy, when I go to the island and I watch the tides ebbing and flowing, it's just a very comforting reminder of, you know, the way things carry on. The trees on the island are just beautiful. This is a sycamore tree on the Piedmont part of the island on the western shore that I have named Grandmother Sycamore. There she is again. These were taken from a kayak. And kayaking around the island is one of my favorite things. You can rent a kayak at either Thompson Boat Center or Keybridge Boathouse and paddle all the way around the island. And you have this wild experience while you're right next to the island shore, and then this view when you come around the tip of Little Island. And on the right is the Kennedy Center seen from the Swamp Boardwalk. I've never been a huge fan of the Kennedy Center architecture, but when you've got cattails in the foreground, it really improves the view. And this is, this is your view coming right around Little Island. And this is one of Gary's beautiful pictures looking up toward Key Bridge and Georgetown. No. Paddling is so great. These were pre-pandemic pictures, obviously. A lot of school cross-country teams train on the island. I love to see young people running. This was an evening on Little River when it was just smooth as glass. And this is the western shore. These are pickerel weed flowers. Every summer I lead wildflower paddling trips around the island so that we can just paddle right up to the flowers and enjoy them and identify them. This is sneezeweed on the eastern shore. It's called sneezeweed because a snuff was made from the plant. And on the right is one of the mini basking turtles. You see, that's a red-bellied turtle, and I love to see the turtles when I'm paddling. I mentioned the birding at the island is just wonderful. These are great egrets. This is a great blue heron, a photograph taken at dawn by my friend Terry Markle. And I'm going to just take you through the seasons. And I wanted to read a passage. This is a passage that I quote in the Finding Solace book, just to give you an idea of Roosevelt's writing. He's writing about the seasons. This was in his 1913 autobiography, and he wrote, "We love all the seasons, the snows and bare woods of winter, the rush of growing things, and the blossom spray of spring, the yellow grain, the ripening fruits and tasseled corn, and the deep leafy shades that are heralded by the green dance of summer, and the sharp fall winds that tear the brilliant banners with which the trees greet the dying year." I'm hearing some sounds. Can you guys still hear me?
Yep, I just muted that person.
Okay. So, I just think that passage is really beautiful. So this is summer. This is the swamp boardwalk going through a silver maple swamp. The silver maples on the island are just lovely. They have their leaves, the undersides of the leaves are silvery. And whether you're walking on the boardwalk or paddling around the island, you're under these silvery leaves. And when they blow in the breeze, they're just very sweet. And I love to see what has landed on the boardwalk. On the left are winged seeds from the box elder tree. They're called samaras. And on the right are some samaras from an ash tree, from a green ash. I was very happy to find them this summer because the emerald ash borer has really devastated the green and white ashes of the island. And when you see them, see some that are still producing fruit, it's a happy occurrence. There is wild rice growing in the tidal marsh. There are wild oats. Those are wild oats on the left, and wild rye, the two pictures on the right, in the center and on the right. There are 3 different species of rye on the island, and lots of summer wildflowers. This is purple ironweed in the middle and on the right. And then in the upper left-hand corner is the Virginia dayflower, which it's not a common flower at all. It's always exciting to see it. And the color of the petals is just like the color of the summer sky. And then arrowhead down on the left. And here's a swamp rose plant that grows right out of the rocks on the eastern shore. And the cardinal flower. And that's Roosevelt, he was better known as a birder for those who knew that he was a naturalist. But he also loved wildflowers, and the cardinal flower is one of the flowers that he wrote about in his autobiography. Here's a beautiful buck. I know deer are problematic in our urban parks because they eat the native plants, but this is such a beautiful animal. I just had to include it. Gary took this beautiful picture. These are all Gary's pictures here. Seeing the osprey in the summer is one of the greatest thrills at the island. You can see them diving into the river, catching fish, flying up to the top of a tree and devouring the fish. And, on a summer kayaking trip, seeing the ospreys is just one of the greatest thrills. And also the bald eagles. We did see a bald eagle on Wednesday. And the last time I kayaked around the island, I saw 2 bald eagles. So the eagles are here all year. The ospreys go way far south to South America in the winter. And these are wood ducks. I saw these this week in Little River. And I love this picture of Gary's because we always exclaim over the beauty of the male wood duck, but look how beautiful the female is too with her white eyeliner. And I love the fact that she's in the foreground looking so lovely. The squirrels, they're out and about all the time, up in the trees, eating whatever they can find. And then autumn on the island is just so nice. And right now we're in late autumn, but there's still splashes of color. And I love this phase of autumn when you've got, you know, the canopy has opened up. You can see the architecture of the trees. You can see the views, but you still have splashes of color. This is a little earlier in the autumn when the Virginia creeper turns bright red. And I wrote in the book about how it looks like the trees are tied with red ribbon. And in the fall, it's art wherever you step. You know, wherever you step, whatever has fallen that moment, that day, that's your art. There's a bald cypress tree in the late autumn. And those are cypress cones on the right and a cypress tree in the summer. This is a deciduous conifer. This is a tree that grows in southern swamps, and you'll find it draped with Spanish moss. Those cones are thick on the tree now. And last week I was on the island, and the bald cypress tree next to the boardwalk, one of the bald cypress trees, was filled with tufted titmice, and they were just devouring the seeds, and those cones were falling apart and landing on the boardwalk, and they're incredibly fragrant. If you can find a bald cypress cone and break it apart, it has this wonderful piney citrusy smell, and the tufted titmice have just released that smell into the air. These are the cypress knees, and they stabilize the trees in southern swamps. These trees were planted at the island. They weren't growing there naturally, but they look right at home. I titled this photo on the right, Feet and Knees. This is a Shumard oak. This oak is rare in our area. It's a southern oak. It has a leaf a lot like a scarlet oak leaf and an acorn like a red oak, northern red oak acorn. And it grows in the floodplain on Theodore Roosevelt Island. Osage oranges. Anna and I saw these on Wednesday. There's a theory that the Osage orange co-evolved with the megafauna, you know, mammoths and mastodons. And when these fall on the ground and they're just lying there, I say to them, you know, I know you're waiting for the mastodons, but they're not coming. And they just look like they're waiting for the megafauna. This is the Little River shoreline. And then, you know, in the late autumn, you still have some asters blooming and a few other flowers. And it's just a really poetic, wonderful time of year. And the cattails are just exploding now, and their seeds are attached to these fluffy hairs. Native American tribes use this fluff to line their moccasins and their babies' cradle boards. And they used every part of the cattail. They ate the roots and the shoots. They wove mats from the leaves. The cattail was a really, really important staple of life. This is the footbridge looking back toward Roslyn. And here it is in the winter. So being from Vermont, I'm a real fan of winter beauty. I love the winter. And I'm always waiting for snow here in Washington. I'll bring my cross-country skis up very soon and hope for the best. I was a little disappointed last year. I didn't get to ski, but if we get 2 inches of snow, I will be out on my skis. And I just find winter beauty so nourishing. And the Potomac still tries to freeze up, and when it does, I describe in the book the sound of the river water moving through the ice along the shore. It's this magical tinkling sound. This was a winter walk that I led for some descendants of Theodore Roosevelt. In the dark jacket is Tweed Roosevelt. He's a great grandson of Theodore Roosevelt. And you notice I don't call him Teddy because he didn't like being called Teddy. That was a pet name that his wife Alice gave to him. And she died, and it was, you know, devastating for him when she died as a very young woman, having just given birth to their first child, first and only child with her, obviously. So it's hard to talk about Teddy Roosevelt and not call him Teddy. That's why I don't. So that's Tweed Roosevelt in the foreground. Susan Roosevelt Weld is in the green jacket. She is also a great grandchild of Theodore Roosevelt. And the young man in the blue jeans in the foreground is Winthrop Roosevelt. He's a great-grandson. He's Tweed's son. And what we're doing there is we're looking at beaver tracks in the mud flat. It was low tide, and Winthrop spotted some beaver tracks in the mud flat. So this is 3 descendants of Theodore Roosevelt looking at beaver tracks. The woman who's bending down with the red glove is Nicole Goldstein. She's on the board of Friends of Theodore Roosevelt Island. And to the right is a young man who's on the staff of Congressman French Hill's office. He's a real fan of Roosevelt and of national parks. And it was such a privilege to walk with them on the island. It was amazing. And to see how much they all love nature. Grandmother sycamore in the winter. And then during the spring, during my year of record, the late winter of 2017 was one of those weird, it was a really weird winter, maybe the weirdest, because it got very warm. It went up into the 80s and everything started to bloom. You know, the buds started to pop, flowers came out. And then we had a hard freeze in early March. And a lot of things were frozen. You may remember all the magnolias, early blooming magnolias turned brown. The cherry blossoms were really threatened for the first time in history. A lot of their buds were blighted, although they did manage to come back from that. And I wrote an op-ed for the Washington Post about something this term that I coined, which is phenology anxiety. Phenology is the science of timing in nature. When do flowers bloom? When do birds migrate? When do they nest? Nature, everything is very intricately timed in nature, and there's a lot of flexibility within it, but there are certain things that happen at certain times, and when you have these violent changes in the norm, it really throws things off. And I think this was a time when people really started to worry about climate change and to feel very nervous. A lot of people had their allergies kick in early. That got their attention. And anyway, and I think, you know, Anna and Stella are proponents of citizen science, and they're involved in all kinds of projects where you carefully, meticulously record happenings in nature. And it's really important that we all pay attention and really keep track of what is normal and try to keep us on track. I was so relieved when a normal spring finally came after this season of phenology anxiety on the island. The bluebells, they had started to bloom and they came bouncing back. The edges of the leaves, I write in the book how they were almost like old-fashioned parchment. You know, they just kind of got a little bit browned at the edges, but otherwise they were really bouncing back. And the spring ephemeral wildflowers on the island are just spectacular. These are trout lilies on the right, springing right up out of the rocks, and spring beauties. These look very delicate, but they grow, you know, in the very early spring when everything is very uncertain, and they come up right out of the rocks. So they're not delicate the way they look. These are toad-shade trilliums. And you can see they're triumphing even though there is lesser celandine all around them. That's a really bad invasive on the island. But I was amazed at how well the wildflowers did despite the invasive plants. These are some of Gary's wonderful tree photographs. Those are American elm seeds, winged seeds called samaras on the left, and a beautiful musselwood on the right. You can really see it's got that pumped up musselwood look. Eastern redbud.
Melanie, we are at 40. We are at 40.
Okay. Thank you, Anna. I asked Anna to give me that little time check there. So I will speed up a little bit. So on the left is a 5-lined skink, which is a little lizard that you'll see scurrying along the boardwalk. That is a black rat snake, eastern rat snake climbing up a tree, and a box turtle on the right. And I have never seen a box turtle on the island. I was so happy to see Gary's picture. And I gave a talk for Smithsonian Associates and showed this picture last month. And somebody sent me a picture of a baby box turtle they had found on the island. So that really made me happy. This is my brother-in-law, Hill Anderson, on the left, and my dad, Mike Choukas, on the right. Hill practices Tai Chi, and my dad is a birder. And we went to the island, and my dad was watching the great blue herons and the wood ducks, and Hill and my sister Ellie were doing Tai Chi on the boardwalk. And you can see there's the Kennedy Center in the background. This is a young cormorant on Shag Island. I named this rock outcrop Shag Island because cormorants are always hanging out on the rocks and around the rocks. And my grandfather would make fun of my dad when he was my dad's a lifelong birder, and my grandfather would make fun of him up in Maine where he lived. He'd say, you know, why are you watching those shags? A shag's a shag. And that was his disparaging word for the cormorant. And then he used it for any big bird. So it's part of our family lore. In October of 2017, there was a 50th anniversary celebration of the statue in the plaza, and lots of people came to celebrate. It was a really rainy day. There are some very cool cupcakes. Those are Teddy cupcakes. I can use Teddy there. And this guy on the right, Joe Wiegand, is just the most amazing TR impersonator. People just do a double take even when they see him before he started doing his act. I led a tree walk that day. There was birding on the island. This is a cottonwood tree on Theodore Roosevelt Island. And the really cool thing is that the same species of cottonwood grows in the Badlands of North Dakota, which is where TR went as a young man. He first went out there to hunt a bison, and then he purchased a cattle ranch, actually 2 cattle ranches, and he lived out there off and on when he was in his 20s for several years. And I just love the fact that the same species of cottonwood that grows on Theodore Roosevelt Island also grows in the Dakota Badlands. And he built his Elkhorn ranch house from cottonwood. This is the Little Missouri River that runs right through Theodore Roosevelt National Park, and his ranch is along the river. And he went out to the Dakota Territory as a very wounded young man. His wife and his mother died on the same day, Valentine's Day of 1884. And he went out there. He was a wounded man. He was very depressed. And being out in this beautiful wilderness area really brought him back to life. And he said later, here the romance of my life began. Here's the Little Missouri. I lead trips out there for Smithsonian Associates in September. We had to cancel this year. But the fall color is beautiful. All the golden yellow flowers and cottonwood trees. This is off topic, but I had to include it. In the museum, in the visitor center at the park, at Theodore Roosevelt National Park, they have this shirt that TR was wearing when he was a bull moose candidate, and somebody shot him in the chest while he was giving a speech in Milwaukee. And he kept talking for 45 minutes, even though he had been shot in the chest. And that's the bullet hole. You can still see the blood on that bullet hole. This is quite a drastic little transition there, but this is Stephanie Mason. She's the senior naturalist at the Audubon Naturalist Society. And I wrote another book earlier this year, Resilience, Connecting with Nature in a Time of Crisis. And I interviewed Stephanie, and she said, you don't have to mind social distancing with a violet. You can bend down and peer into its flowering face and breathe deeply of it. These are just some tools of the trade. Now, Anna has gotten me to be more of an app user when I'm IDing. And I really am grateful for that. But you can see these are my beat up old field guides, my binoculars, and my hand lenses on the left. And, for children and families, getting out in nature is just absolutely the best medicine now, especially. Also, I'm very grateful to my nature-loving friends who share their stories and pictures with me almost every day. These are my friends, Sandy Willen on the left and Terry Markle on the right. They have just inundated me with beautiful photographs of Washington through all the seasons. You can see this family of Canada geese is being led down to Constitution Gardens in the middle. And I don't have time to do this, to do what I had planned. So what I would just like to say here, I was gonna give us a little moment to close our eyes and imagine that we're, in a beautiful place that we love. So what I'm gonna say instead is, when you are, when you can't get out in nature, when you can get out in nature, even if it's just for 5 minutes, to open your front door and walk out and just be outside for 5 minutes, you can get the benefits from that. But if you can't do that, if you're at your laptop and you can't get up or whatever you're doing, just close your eyes and imagine that you're in a beautiful place that you love. And just go there in your mind. And that little nature break in your mind can be really healing. And so I wanted to share this. Anna took this photograph on Wednesday of grandmother's sycamore and one of grandmother's leaves. And I want to close with this quote from Roosevelt. "It is an incalculable added pleasure to anyone's sum of happiness if he or she grows to know, even slightly and imperfectly, how to read and enjoy the wonder book of nature." Thank you, Anna and Stella. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much, Melanie. I really appreciate it. That was wonderful. I feel like every time I hear your presentation, I learn something new. So I just love it. Thank you so much. Before we move on to the conversation, the sort of Q&A part and conversation with Melanie, just wanted to take a quick minute to just tell you how you can contact us and what we do. So Capital Nature, we actually, we promote events that are going on in the DC area and offer our own designed programming. And you can find all of the events. We usually add hundreds of events once a month to our website, capitalnature.org, on the calendar. We're also active on social media. We also have a monthly newsletter that we send out monthly for nature happenings and such. And if you're interested in us adding you to our newsletter list, feel free to put yes in the chat, please. That would be great, and we will add you to it. Stella, did I miss anything?
No, sounds great. Thank you. And we invite you to visit the website, capitalnature.org. And there are all kinds of events and interesting features about regional nature.
Great. Well, let's start the conversation. So Melanie, you can go ahead and stop sharing your screen. And if people would like to turn on their video, it'll be more like a group conversation if you put it in the gallery view. And we'll just have a conversation. If you guys have any questions, please put them in the chat and I'll be monitoring those.
Melanie, thank you so much. Stella back here. So all of those shots of snow on the island made me both wistful and hopeful. I'm hopeful that this year we can actually go and see that beautiful snow everywhere. So thumbs up for that. I'm
absolutely
keeping hope.
I'm with you. Let's start doing our snow dance today, Stella.
I love it. And I wanted to invite everybody who's on the call. Actually, I'd like to show our appreciation to Melanie, who really is so restorative, even when she's on Zoom. So please either do a hand gesture or a thumbs up, a Zoom applause, just so she knows how much we appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
It
is very surreal to just keep talking into your laptop, and when I'm talking, I could see a few of you. I could see 4 people. But to just not be able to see you all. But aren't we lucky that we have this tool, that we're able to stay connected with this tool? We're very, very lucky.
We really are. And of course, scientists tell us that even just looking at pictures of nature are restorative to our brains. our bodies. So I think this is a great example. Uh, so Melanie, I've got a starter question for you. You've given this talk a number of times, and I've enjoyed it. I must say that I'm a little bit of a groupie, and Anna and I have watched you, as you know, a few times. What has been the response? Like, as you've talked around the country about this book and your experience, what's the response you're getting from people?
Well, there are kind of two responses. The people who have been to the island love the island, and it always amazes me how many people, even from far-flung places, have come here and have gone to the island. I've been happily surprised how many people know about it. But then there's the other response, which is, I've never heard of that place. Where is it? Or I've heard of it, but I've never been there. So it's very interesting, you know, to just kind of see those two different groups of people. And I've gotten some wonderful feedback from readers that, you know, there's some painful stuff in the book because it wasn't an easy time for me and for a lot of us. And that is there. And I've had, you know, people have told me that they've cried when they read those parts. But that it's so healing to read about nature and to read about a place that is right in the middle of the city. I mean, the island is totally within the District of Columbia, that you could have such a wild experience on this island, and especially the kayaking. I think that's resonated with people the most. You know, that you could get in a kayak and, you know, see great blue herons and kingfishers, and there's the Washington Monument and the Lincoln Memorial in the distance. It's a very intriguing thing. And you know, a lot of people are connecting more with nature in cities, not just in our city, but in cities throughout the country and around the world, are really appreciating their parkland and devoting more stewardship time to their parks and gardens. So I think that really resonates with people too.
Very much so. And I've had a chance to visit the island maybe 4 times, and it's been really a wonderful experience each time. And there are certain qualities of the island that really speak to me. But before I share those, I wanted to ask you, you showed us a lot of the species and the physical attributes of the island, but you do write in your book about how restorative, really spiritually, the island was for you. What are the qualities of the island? You know, the sort of almost ephemeral qualities of the place that you think supported your restoration and your healing?
That's such a great question. And you know, there's been all this medical research about how spending time in nature benefits your physical and mental health. And I think the most important thing it does for us is how it benefits our spiritual health. But that's a harder thing to study. The island, to me, I mean, the fact that, you know, there's a primal appeal to an island, a place that's surrounded by water, and that healing feeling you get just walking across the footbridge over Little River, and the river never looks the same. You know, the light and the, you know, the wind always change, you know, the colors, the reflections, it's always different. But walking across the bridge, and it's a pretty long bridge, so you're out over Little River for quite a while, and you almost always see some kind of bird life, and then the trees beckon to you. And then being along the shoreline, like sitting on those rocks, those really dramatic rocks, it's the Sykesville Formation. It's a very old metamorphic rock, probably 500 million years old. And grandmother sycamore, this tall white tree, is just springing out of these rocks with her roots wrapped around them, like 15 feet long along the rocks. And sitting by the water under the tree, it's just very healing. I love being around rocks as well as trees. So the rocks and the trees and the water, and then the boardwalk. You know, you start out on the boardwalk, you're going through a swamp. And the difference between a swamp and a marsh is a swamp has woody plants in it and a marsh does not. So you're walking through this forested swamp, and then you come out to this open tidal marsh. And there's a place that you can take this turn from the boardwalk, this place off to the side, where you can actually watch the tide either flowing out or flowing in or slack tide. And if you're patient, you can see all three. And that is just deeply spiritually comforting to me. And then when I can look over and see my city right there on the horizon while I'm experiencing this very calm, feeling of being surrounded by beauty, it's just a deeply healing thing. And I think a lot of people feel it.
Yeah, I really resonate with that. And for me, I think the island has such qualities of discovery. And I think hearing you speak helped me understand why, that I never fully appreciated that the two kind of geological elements of our region meet in the island. Because it seems like anytime you're on the island, you walk for a little while and you discover a completely new landscape, a completely different quality,
Exactly.
full of surprise and delight.
Yeah, that's the thing. So in 1 hour, you can walk in an upland forest, along a lowland floodplain forest. You can be sitting on the rocks. You can be on a flat sandy plain. You can be in a tidal inlet. Yes, it's that's a really good point. A lot of dramatic change in a very small area.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then that feeling of being on an island, it's just really nice to be on an island.
Yeah. I think all of us feel a little bit like Robinson, don't we? Like we've just
We
discovered.
do. It's like Treasure Island. And I love Kingman Island too.
Yeah, very much. I feel that too. So, remember you started at the beginning, you mentioned the kingfisher, but you never actually told us the story of the kingfisher. So could you please tell us how this kingfisher got you on this whole project?
I would love to. I would love to share that. So I was getting ready to lead a kayaking tree tour for Casey Trees. And I had rented a kayak at Keybridge Boathouse, and I was paddling along the western shore of the island. It was almost dark. There was a crescent moon in the sky and the sun was going down, and I knew I was going to have to turn around soon. But I'm like that little kid who just doesn't want to go in when mommy calls. And I was the only boat still out on the river. So I was paddling down Little River right close to the shore, and this kingfisher flew in front of me. And she would dive into the river and try to catch a fish and then go up into the branches of a tree. Sadly, a lot of dying ashes right along the shore. And if you know kingfishers, they chatter all the time. So she was chattering the whole time, diving, landing in a tree, chattering, and staying right out in front of my kayak, all the way down to almost to the Theodore Roosevelt Bridge. And I really didn't want to turn around. I mean, not just because it was getting dark, but because I didn't want to leave this kingfisher. We'd stayed together for so long. And so then I thought, well, at least now I'll stop bothering her. When I turn around and go back, she'll be happy. She can fish in peace. I turned my boat around. She turned around with me. And I get chills every time I tell this. She flew in front of my boat all the way back to the northern end of the island. And I was just so amazed by that. I don't know why. I don't know, maybe my boat was stirring up fish for her. Maybe that was just her territory and it was coincidental. But it just felt so synchronistic in such a magical way. And then I thought, is she trying to tell me something? And the way I heard whatever her message was, the way I heard it was, pay attention to this island. And so that's what I did. And then I spent the next year just going there as often as I could. And it turned out to be incredible medicine for what lay ahead in November of that year. And I will say no more about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. We're taking this lunchtime Zoom till 1:15 to make sure that those of you who want to be part of a discussion can stay on. So I wanted to open this up to those of you that are attending. And I'd like to pose kind of two questions to the two of you. One is, what about Melanie's presentation really resonates with you? Does it ring true for similar experiences you've had in other places? Or maybe on the island itself. And also, if you've had some interesting experiences on the island, please feel free to share with us, and we'd really enjoy hearing about them. And at this point, I'm actually going to turn it over to Anna.
Yeah, thanks Thanks, Stella. When people are mulling over the questions that Stella just put forth, I'm just going to go through a quick, some of the questions that have come in the chat. Jerry says, I've seen many pawpaw trees on the island, but very little fruit. Have you found any fruit-bearing pawpaws on the island?
Yes, but only 2 fruits. Yeah, there are not many fruits. That's a very good observation. These trees, they bloom their full heads off in the spring, but they produce very little fruit. And the reason for that is that pawpaws they can't self-pollinate, and they can't pollinate with somebody who's genetically identical. And because they are colonial, most of them are genetically identical. So you get very little cross-pollination, but there are a few fruits. So that's one reason you see few, is because of that. But also animals love that fruit. So as soon as they ripen, they're going to be gone. But yeah, there are a lot of pawpaws in Rock Creek Park as well, and I rarely see fruit. I think I've only seen fruit on a pawpaw in Rock Creek Park once. A really good place for pawpaw fruit is Blockhouse Point, which is north of the city along the river, off of River Road.
Can you repeat that, Melanie? I'll put that in the chat.
Blockhouse Point.
Block, okay.
For pawpaws.
Okay, great. Another question that came in. Thanks so much. I love the island. Do you know if the cattails in the swamp are the invasive or the good sort? Now I know we saw 2 different types on Wednesday, if you want to explain that.
No, they're good. They're good. They're good. There are 2 species. There's the common cattail, Typha latifolia, and the narrow-leaved cattail, Typha angustifolia. And the common cattail has a fatter head, thicker head, and the narrow-leaved cattail has a thinner one. And it's really cool because, I talked about how we're right on the border of the Piedmont and the coastal plain. The common cattail is more common on the Piedmont, and the narrow-leaved is more common on the coastal plain. And they kind of grow in the Piedmont and the coastal plain right there, side by side. And then Rod Simmons, if any of you know Rod, who's the resource manager for the city of Alexandria and just an incredibly knowledgeable plant person. He told me, he walked on the island with me during my year of record, and I tell the story in the book. He said they also hybridize, so you get hybrids. So I'm wondering, were you thinking of Phragmites? Is that the bad plant you were thinking of?
I don't remember who asked that question, but if that person wants to unmute themselves, so ask the question about the cattails.
And I don't think there's any Phragmites on the island. I haven't seen any Phragmites. It's probably there, but.
We have another question. You mentioned the history of the island held the first colored cord. Can you elaborate on that history?
Yeah, I don't know too much about it. I have been told that they were on the island, they were trained on the island, and then they fought, and they fought very honorably. I have been told they were on the island because people didn't want them trained in their neighborhood, and I don't know if that's true. But they were trained on the island. There is a wayside plaque about it. You can read about it. And then some of them went on to fight in the Spanish-American War in Cuba. And apparently they were like just a very successful troop unit, the first US colored troops.
Thank you, Melanie. We've had a couple mentionings of the monthly full moon walks that the Friends group used to do you know if they're, I personally don't know if they are doing that anymore.
Yeah, the Friends have suspended their in the field events until we get through the pandemic, but I'm sure they will start up with them again. They were very popular.
And definitely if they start up, you guys, again, check out capitalnature.org and click on the calendar because, Stella and I kind of keep track of all those very cool events. Let's see. I live very close to the island and so visit often. This year is the first time that I see turkeys. Not every trip, but they are there. Oh, I would have been so excited to see turkeys. Oh,
I'm so jealous. I haven't seen them yet. I keep hearing about them. Can you let us know in the chat where you've seen them on the island?
That would be great. That was from Unit 410, Chissen and Joanna, that comment. Nick Young, we did have a comment about lesser celandine. Apart from the lesser celandine, are there other invasives threatening the island?
Yeah, I mean, you know, all of our urban parks are so susceptible to invasive plants, and the island has lots of Asian honeysuckle, wineberry, you know, all the bad vines, porcelain berry. I haven't seen any kudzu there, but there's porcelain berry. There's oriental bittersweet, English ivy, which is, and you know, they have these invasive days. You can, and I don't know if you guys put this on your website, on the Capital Nature website, but I think it's the Arlington Master Naturalists and Friends of Theodore Roosevelt Island that do these invasive
Polls.
days. Yeah, and you sign up, I mean, you have to sign up for them. They fill up. And they give you the tools that you need and teach you how to you know, get rid of the invasive plants. And it's a very therapeutic thing to do. And it's really nice to go out with a whole group of people on a invasives removal day and just have a party and go out there and save those native plants.
We did have a location, the sighting of the turkeys was at the boardwalk in the upland portion. So we got that, so that's great.
Good
If we have any master gardeners on the, I'm not sure, Melanie, if you know, we've had Alan asked, is there any way to halt the invasion of lesser celandine in our woods? I don't know, I'm not sure if you know the answer to that, or if there are any master gardeners that might be on the Zoom that might be able to put that in the chat.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear. I know they have been successful in the Boundary Bridge area of Rock Creek Park. They've been treating with an herbicide every March and March. Yeah, it's all, I guess it's always in March. Every March for at least 5 years, and the native plants have really rebounded. So that area just south of Boundary Bridge, it's at the DC Maryland line of Rock Creek Park, was overrun with lesser celandine. And now you go there in the early spring, and I lead walks there every spring for the Audubon Naturalist Society. I've already scheduled one for April. And you see Virginia bluebells and trout lilies and spring beauties and cutleaf toothwort, wild ginger. All of the native plants have come back, but I don't know any other ways to do it. And, you know, and spraying with herbicides is definitely controversial. It's had a, you know, profound effect in that one small area, and they can only afford to treat this one area. It's about half a mile along the creek. And then when you go beyond it, it's like a line in the sand, and then it's just a carpet of lesser celandine where it hasn't been treated.
Got it, thank
So
you.
I don't know if we have anyone else who's more knowledgeable about that.
Ginny did mention that the Arlington Master Naturalist leads monthly polls with actually my colleague, Jenny Wiedauer. And Stella.
Yes, Jenny.
Yeah,
Hi, Jenny.
Stella, I think you participated in one of those walks, right? So they said to check the calendar, which is armn.org, and that is in the chat. Sarah Mayhew says Fairfax County Park Authority also treats lesser celandine with herbicides. I don't know if you're a cross-country skier, Melanie, or if anyone else is on the call, but Alan has asked what our favorite DC area venues are for cross-country skiing. That's I'm not a skier, so I can't speak to that. I don't know if anyone is a cross-country skier, but.
Well, I am, and I love to ski in Rock Creek Park. And, you know, depending on how adventurous I'm feeling, I like, you know, I kind of like to just glide along and just glide along the creek. But, you know, every now and then I feel adventurous and ready for some hills. And you have those in Rock Creek Park. The island would be a great place to ski if you can get there. I have, you know, I've been there in the snow. I've never been there with my skis. I hope to do that this winter. Stella, you want to get some skis and meet me on the island when we have our wonderful snowfall?
I'm more of a walker, but I have cross-country and I have survived. So yes, I'm in.
That would be so great. Yeah, and I love it. And it's just such a meditative thing to do. You know, when you're skiing along the river or the creek, and
Alan mentions the Rock Creek as a question, perhaps the Rock Creek Park Golf Course. How about skiing there? Have you ever seen that?
Oh, no, I never have, but there's some good hills there. Yeah. Has he skied there? Alan, have you skied there?
You can. Yeah.
Oh, I'll have to try that.
Are you unmuted, Ellen?
I used to when they had snow, but there hasn't been any snow.
Yeah, so hopefully we'll get a big snow this season. Do we have any other questions? We've gotten a lot of nice messages and thank yous for the presentation. Thanks so much for joining us during your lunch today, you guys. This has been wonderful.
And Anna, did you want to, before we sign off, did you want to say anything about either the calendar or the newsletter again, or have we covered
Oh yeah,
that already?
actually, what was really great, when we had the slide up, we had said if anybody wants to be added to the Capital Nature newsletter, just put yes in the chat so we have that recorded and we can add you to the list. That would be really great. Again, we add events like this, both virtual and in-person events every month. Stella and I curate. We look at about 80 different local organizations, nonprofits, and agencies that are doing cool nature events. I lead forest bathing walks, both virtual and in person, so check those out. Also, I wanted to say that, you know, it's sad that Melanie is not able to do her book signings in person. She can't do any personal book signings. So, you see, she has all those amazing books. And if you happen to buy them, I'm going to put her email in the chat. And if you guys want to arrange, we were kind of brainstorming, like maybe she goes and sits at a bench in Rock Creek Park and just a safely distance, you guys can go by and say hi and bring your books to get signed. So we thought that would be really cool. So I'm going to put her email in the chat so that you can do that. Did I miss anything?
Thank you so much. Yeah, so if you just email me, we can find a way to get together in a safe place outside and I'll sign your books for you. And the books are, all my books are at Politics and Prose, at the Audubon Naturalist Society bookshop, and on Amazon. So you can get them all at all those 3 places.
Great. Melanie, thank you so much for joining us for a very real virtual experience. And I hope we get to go out on in-person tours with you very soon. And thanks to all of you who joined us, who are probably naturalists in your own way, in your own right. Thanks for sharing your time with us and exploring the island with all of us.
It's delightful.
Have a
Thank
great,
you so much.
have a great day, everybody.